Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're glad you made some time to be with us this evening. I'm Alyssa DeFilippo with Parents Helping Parents. I run a program called Connections California, which is our online statewide resource and information hub for transition to adulthood and adult services. So, if you want to learn more about the new IPP form being used by regional centers, you have come to the right place. This evening, we're honored to welcome to PHP's Connection California screen, Marcy Okada and Ernie Cruz from the California Department of Developmental Services. We'll refer to that affectionately as DDS. As you probably know, DDS provides services and supports to Californians with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families throughout their lifespans so that they may live the life of their choosing in their communities. Marcy Okada is the Chief of Transitions and Partnerships section at DDS. She leads a team that develops policies for individuals ages 3 to 22 who receive regional center services throughout California. Marcy has been a direct service provider, a special education teacher, and has held several different roles in developing and overseeing DDS program policies. She's very passionate about creating opportunities for individuals with disabilities to live independent and fulfilling lives. And joining Marcy this evening is Ernie Cruz, Deputy Director of the Community Services Division at DDS. Ernie has been a special consultant and assistant deputy director at DDS for several years, and before that held several positions at the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center. He too is dedicated to creating opportunities for individuals with disabilities to live independent and fulfilling lives. I thank everyone for being here. I thank Gabriel, our interpreter, for being here, and certainly Marcy and Ernie. And now we'll turn it over to Ernie or Marcy.
Hi. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. Hello, my name is Ernie Cruz, and as was indicated, I'm the Deputy Director in the Community Services Division at the Department of Developmental Services. Again, just want to thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'm going to share my screen so that we could have the presentation up. And Marcy, does that look okay? All right, thanks. So fortunate enough for me, joining me today in this presentation is Marcy. We're going to talk about the new standardized individual program plan and share with you information about the IPP. I'll try to stay away from acronyms. The IPP, the individual program plan, we're going to share information with you about the new format and about some helpful guides and additional resources. This has been a project that's been going on over the last couple of years, and it was really a collaborative undertaking to get this new format for the IPP officially launched as of January 1st of 2025. Throughout the presentation, I'll put links. We have a dedicated page on our website that has all the IPP information as well that would be helpful to refer to. All right, so let me go to the next slide. So for today's presentation, it'll consist of the agenda items that you see on the screen. Would like to go over the changes to the IPP, address the new format, and provide more context and information about the different parts of the IPP. Marcy will go over a guide that was developed along with the IPP called Your Plan. It was developed for individuals of all ages to help them prepare for the IPP meeting. And I'll review some resources that are available to you that are all on our website before ending with closing comments and questions. All right, so we'll start with an overview of the standardized IPP and the process. So this is a good slide to show the changes to the IPP. What's new, what's the same. With the new IPP, you can expect some parts of it to be different than what you may be used to. As was mentioned at the beginning, it's a standardized IPP that all 21 regional centers have to use across the state. So it's standardized. They have to use the same format. And that really came from feedback that we received from the community about wanting some consistency with the IPP. In putting together the standardized IPP, that discussion really started with a work group. It started with the Regional Center Performance Measures work group. And those work group members, which included individuals, families, advocates, they wanted an IPP that was person-centered and offered more flexibility in what the individual includes in their IPP. Particularly, they wanted it to focus on strengths and linking to personal preferences and linking those personal preferences to goals and outcomes. Additionally, as I mentioned before, they really wanted statewide implementation so that it was consistent across all 21 regional centers. You'll also see with the new format that there are areas and prompts to guide through development of the IPP. As part of that, there's also been, over the years, investments made in increasing the knowledge base related to person-centered thinking, both at the regional center with service coordinators and with staff, regional centers having person-centered trainers and getting those concepts across to service coordinators and applying those person-centered practices to supporting individuals served. Those skills that have been in development have now been applied in the development of the standardized person-centered IPP. Despite the changes, the principles and requirements of the IPP have not changed, such as the statute and the requirements of the IPP remain the same. The regional center's role in the IPP and the assessment of needs and services remains the same, and the documentation that is needed for information sharing. So those are still, the principles of the IPP remain the same, just with some changes. So I talked about person-centered planning. In this section, I'm going to go over and do a quick review of person-centered planning and how it applies to gathering and documenting information in the new IPP using these person-centered skills. The expectation is both that the process of developing the IPP and the contents of the IPP are driven using person-centered tools and skills. What is person-centered planning? It's an approach that centers on the individual to drive the decision-making process for things that impact their life. It emphasizes people's unique preferences, strengths, skills, and aspirations. There are 7 key principles in person-centered planning, and you can see here on this slide. And those include that it's individualized, that it's respectful, that it's collaborative, that it's self-directed, that it has a whole person approach, that it's flexible and evolving, and that it's outcome-oriented. And so these principles are important and continue to be the foundation of how this IPP is developed and how this new standardized IPP is to be developed. Important to and important for, you may have heard this term before. The IPP should be developed in a person-centered way so that what that means is that understanding what is important to and important for and what that means. In the new IPP, these terms will be discussed as part of each of the different life areas that I'll get into in a future slide that are part of a person's IPP. So important to are those things in life that make the person feel satisfied, happy, and included. It could be things that provide comfort and a sense of welcoming. In thinking about important to, it helps to think about relationships and people they choose to spend time with, status, control, culture, identity, as well as purpose and meaning. And then there's important for that includes the things in life that support the person to be healthy and safe. That can include physical health and wellness, physical and psychological safety, including proactive steps and prevention to ensure health and safety are maintained, emotional health and safety, as well as needs. We have to be valued, to feel valued and part of our community. Important for is something that our service system has traditionally been more familiar with. There's always a lot of emphasis on the importance of health and safety, and that's not a bad thing, but there has to be a balance, right? The important for is important, but there should also be consideration and balance with important too. The service coordinator should be actively engaged and help people be able to discover what is important to and important for them as individuals. This also applies to individuals and families who speak another language or are from other cultures. Another important aspect of the new IPP that is important to be captured is whether it's in first person or third person. So individuals get to decide if they want their IPP to be in first or third person. And first person is using language like I, me, my, and third person uses he, his, she, her, they, their, or their first name. A first person IPP is written from the perspective of the person and can be used when they play an active role in writing the plan or a section of the plan. A third person IPP is still reflective of their input into the plan, but is written from the perspective of the author of the document. Deciding on first person or third person, that should be a planning team discussion on how that IPP is going to be written. Some key things to remember is that the IPP should be self-directed by the individual or by their family and should be involved as much as possible. The IPP may include others who the person or the family chooses, and it should identify the person's strengths, goals, preferences, needs, and desired outcomes. The IPP supports people with identifying and accessing paid and unpaid services to meet their identified needs and desires, and it supports the person making choices about their life and supports needed to live well. So now I'm going to get into what's included in the standardized IPP, the sections of it. I'm going to describe that new format and what it includes and what you can expect to see in the standardized IPP. This format was developed with the recommendations and input of many different community partners, as I mentioned at the beginning. For each of these sections of the new IPP, they were structured. These are the sections, but within each section, there are guiding questions to help formulate that discussion between the planning team and to help think about what should be included in each of these sections. The IPP starts with the opportunity to provide a positive introduction to the individual. This is where the important things that's important to the individual, that they want people to know about them. They want people to know what others admire them for and what they are most proud of in their life. It should really be an introduction to the person. How this plan was developed records where a meeting happened, the way the individual chose to participate in the planning meeting, and who else helped with the individual program plan. This section is all about the planning meeting. Where did the meeting take place? Who was at the meeting? How did everyone participate in the meeting? The IPP meeting should be an opportunity for the individual to decide who provides input into their plan and what type of information is provided. And for young children who may have difficulty sitting through a long meeting, how the planning team captured the wants and needs and preferences should be indicated here. A vision for the future identifies what the short-term and long-term vision a person or family has, this is where you would capture or share information about short-term and long-term goals. Short-term means something that they want to happen or achieve soon, like within a year or less. Long-term means something in the future, like 2 years or longer. The next part of the IPP is on communication. And as we know, communication is critical to everyone's life. And it's an important part, obviously, of this new IPP. Here is really meant to capture what is the best way to communicate with the person. What do others do? What do others need to know to be able to communicate with the person? Do they have supports or devices that are needed to communicate? How do they show that they understand? Just think about what other important information they want to share related to how they communicate. Decision making. This is a section of the IPP that offers flexibility in recording how a person makes decisions depending on the life area. And like I said, life areas is coming up, and who they receive supports from. So, some of the questions here are, what decisions does a person make for themselves? For parents, what decisions do you make for your child? Will your child need an advocate in the future? Is there anyone else involved in decision making? So, there's some prompting questions in here to really get some thinking with regards to the decision making process. Life areas. This is a flexible section of the IPP that talks about a person's goals and how they would like to meet those. We'll have in the next slide, there'll be more details on those life areas. And then the final section in the IPP is emergency planning. And, everyone may experience an emergency in their life, but having a plan in place will help the people around them to know what to do. Is there an emergency plan? What are the steps needed to keep the person healthy and safe during an emergency? Who should be contacted when there is an emergency? So those are some of the prompting questions. The purpose of this section of the emergency planning section in the IPP is to also describe the risk in an individual's life that may lead to an emergency, and that the individual and the planning team agree a specific emergency plan is important. So let's move on to the life areas. So what are life areas? Life areas, they're used as a way to talk about goals and supports needed to meet those goals. They are used to address desired outcomes or a goal for the most important parts of the individual's life. This format offers areas that can be flexible in reflecting the outcomes and services that an individual would like to highlight in their IPP. And in this section, for each life area, there are 4 prompting questions. What is currently happening? What is important to the individual? What is important for the individual? And what needs to be done to meet the goal? It should also be noted that any funded services need to be tied to a life area. All right, so these are the life areas. There are 12 life areas that individuals may choose to include in their IPP. You have, in thinking of these life areas, a lot of thought was put into trying to capture every aspect of someone's life, whether it's education, employment, home life, relationships, transportation. Those were all considerations in coming up with the life areas. The IPP offers flexibility to use whatever life area fits best within the desired goal and services needed to meet those goals. We often get the question of, why isn't there an other category? But as I mentioned, these categories were developed to be broad enough to cover the different goals and outcomes. And as an example, I would use the example of community participation. A hot topic has been social recreation, right? Social recreation services. Social rec may, for one person, be more about community participation, but for a different individual, social rec may be more about relationships. So, that's part of what gets discussed in coming up with these life areas. The IPP agreement and signature page, this is part of the IPP. It's still part of the IPP document, but one of the things that the community was very felt was really important is they wanted the IPP to be about the person. There's a lot of statutory requirements that have to be covered in the IPP, and the IPP agreement and signature page was established to capture a lot of those regulatory requirements. Still part of the IPP. The agreement and signature form includes a lot of the administrative information. So it'll capture information about services and supports, what services were agreed upon, the amount of services. It'll include a section on services and supports. Was there agreement on services? Are there additional requests? Were there any exceptions specifically related to the settings rule, which is a federal requirement? And then there's a section on acknowledgments. And the acknowledgments include, talking about when the next IPP meeting is. Did the service coordinator talk to you about self-direction, including self-determination? Did they talk to you about the complaint process? So it's just a lot of different regulatory items that need to be covered during an IPP meeting. There's also an additional note section, which is an open space to capture any feedback, from any of the planning team members. And then there's a signature part where the planning team members would sign their participation. The IPP survey. The IPP survey is also on the agreement and signature form. It's a QR code, and it was included as part of developing the standardized IPP. The survey is voluntary and anonymous, and can be completed by the individual or family after the IPP meeting. As I mentioned, there's a QR code. There's also a phone number and email address if someone can't navigate the QR code or would rather receive something in the mail. That request comes straight to the department, and the survey data comes straight to DDS. It does not go to the regional center. So that was information that we felt was important for us to have, to just get a sense about how people are feeling about the IPP. The new IPP survey is designed to measure how well the IPP process is working for individuals and families. The focus is on evaluating satisfaction with the IPP meeting and whether participants felt the process was person-centered and whether the meeting reflected best practices in planning. The survey aims to ensure that the IPP process meets the needs and expectations of the people it serves and supports continuous improvement. What you'll see on this slide are the actual questions. There's 6 questions, one of them being what regional center the respondent is with. And like I said, we get these surveys directly. We're going on 1 year already of having the survey out. We're looking at the trends and looking to see potentially adding some optional questions in the future, but these are the questions. For each question, there's a drop-down choice of possible responses. So again, survey is anonymous. It comes straight to the department, and it does not go to the regional centers. So I'll go ahead and stop right here and hand it over to Marcy.
All right, thank you, Ernie. So now that Ernie has provided a strong foundation of the different parts of the IPP, I want to go over the main sections in your plan. So this guide was developed with the input of self-advocates and community members as a tool for individuals and families to know what to expect with the new IPP and also help them plan for their IPP meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the cover of your plan, and the Your Plan guide explains the new format and describes what a person-centered IPP is. This guide is available in 10 different languages, and it was written in plain language, so it's easy to understand. This guide can help individuals identify their preferences, their strengths, and their goals. And within the guide, you'll find an opportunity to learn about person-centered planning, tips for before, during, and after your planning meeting, and also a workbook called About You that includes questions to help you think about the important areas of your life and includes space for you to write down your answers to those questions. This guide is optional, and you can use it or not. But you can read and fill out its pages or ask people for help in filling out the pages. And you can take it to your IPP meeting to help guide the discussion. This could help make all of the areas of their life important to them, make sure that they're covered. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is one of the first pages in the guide, and it gives an overview of what's to come. So we'll briefly take a look at the sections, which include part one, building your individual plan, part two, before your planning meeting, part three is during your planning meeting, and then part four will be after your planning meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the cover page of part one, which is building your individual program plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the first page of the section one in your plan, and it breaks down what the individual will cover in the plan and explains everything that we've talked about or that Ernie has talked about up until this point. So it provides a broad overview of what the guide is and what they can expect to do in the first section, which is really focused on building a strong self-assessment. You'll notice that on this page and then also throughout the entire guide, there are areas where the individual or the family can enter information. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the cover page for part two, which is before your planning meeting. And this section lays out what to consider and plan for before someone has their IPP meeting. Next slide, please. So this is one of the first pages of part two, and it informs the individual of the different things to think about when brainstorming some of these ideas for what they need to be successful. So this page encourages individuals to think about the places where they do things like shaving in the bathroom or going to the store, the different items they may use to reinforce learning. So for example, using real money when budgeting, thinking about the different things they want to do or that they do on their own, and encourages them to think about the overall services and supports that they may need by thinking about what their goals are. Next slide, please. Okay, so this page is also in part two, and it reviews with the individual the different things to consider when making decisions at their meeting. So, for example, it prompts them to consider things that they want to learn, what kind of work they want to do, where they want to live, and how they want to spend their money. It also asks them to consider who it is they want to attend the meeting with them. And this part of the guide really encourages the individual to ask themselves questions that will better prepare them when creating the plan. Next slide, please. So part 3 is during your planning meeting. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so this is one of the pages from part 3, and it's an overview of what individuals should do during the meeting. So some of the suggestions in here include bringing the workbook or the guide that they've completed, be positive, take notes, and to ask for help whenever is needed. Next slide, please. And then we have part 4, which is after your planning meeting. And this is the cover page for part 4. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so there are some pages in the guide that help the individuals reflect on their experience of making the plan. So one of those pages is the one you're looking at on the screen, and it includes a number of yes or no questions that helps the individual determine if they thought the meeting went well. So it gives them free space to write things that they thought went really well, but it also space for them to write down things that they thought could have gone better during that meeting. Next slide. Okay, so this is another example page from part 4, but this page is focused on reflecting after some time has passed. So after 6 months, we do encourage that the individual return to this page and ask themselves if they feel like they're meeting their goals. Are they doing what they want to do? Do they feel like they're seeing people in their life that they want to see? Things like that. There's also space to write down things that they could be doing better. All right, next slide. So that concludes the different parts of the guide. And now we're going to share with you all some resources that we have available.
Yeah, thank you, Marcy. So I think throughout the presentation, there's been links that have been added to the chat, to our dedicated web page. So I'm gonna, go through some of those resources in the next slide. Um, so, a lot of work obviously went into developing the standardized IPP. There was a lot of collaboration, with that work group that I had mentioned initially that consists of individuals served, families, vendors, regional centers, DDS staff, and not only in coming up with the standardized IPP, but then there had to be an IPP guide for the regional centers to follow. Marcy just went through the Your Plan guides, and so all these and then on top of that, there were videos created, both live videos and animated videos. So all of that is available on the DDS webpage, and we're particularly proud of the guides because initially I can remember we started the guides with the idea of, okay, we'll do one guide for the community. And then we were thinking, yeah, but adults is a different population than young children. That is a different population than adolescents. So we ended up with 3 guides. And then we finalize the guides, we get them posted, and it's, and the feedback was good. The feedback was, yeah, but it's 40 pages. We came back and said, yes, it's 40 pages. It's in plain language. It's in a bigger font, but let's narrow that down. And maybe people would like to just go into the guide to get a certain worksheet. So we streamlined the guides. Now you'll see a version of the guides, Your Plan, your child's plan, your youth's plan. That is just the workbook version. All it has are the worksheets. We were able to narrow it down to 20 something pages. So, we keep getting feedback and keep trying to make it easier for people to access and use. We currently have these guides available in 12 language. The purpose of the guides, of the additional guides, your child's plan and your youth plan, is to provide a tool to help individuals and family prepare for the IPP meeting. There were also a variety of trainings that we provided back at the end of 2024. We provided trainings for the regional centers, family resource centers, the client advisory committees. Throughout 2025, we've continued to do that. I mentioned the IPP guide for the regional centers. That guide is available on our website as well. It's a very useful guide because particularly at the end of the guide, there's an appendix area that you can, search for, okay, where is this in statute, whether it's California statute or federal statute. And like I mentioned, there's also the video series. One is an interview style series about using person-centered practices to develop the IPP. And the other is an animated series that explains the IPP and what needs to be done to prepare. Let me go to the next slide. So for the individual program planning, this is a summary of the resources Marcy talked about and that we just reviewed on the last few slides, and more that we weren't able to cover, like frequently asked questions. We actually have the sample forms. These are all available on the DDS website. And if you follow the link on the presentation, it'll give you access to that. Lastly, you'll see the cover art. Marcy went over this for each of the guides: your plan, your child's plan, and your youth's plan. So this concludes the presentation part. Again, really appreciate you guys joining to hear about it. If you have any questions, I've been trying to, I'm not super good at multitasking. I've been trying to answer some of the Q&A, but if I didn't get to your question, please feel free to use the IPP support at dds.ca.gov. If you think of something after the meeting, I know we're going to spend some time now and answer some questions as well. So really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Marcy and Ernie. We appreciate you being here to give the presentation and also answer a few questions we have. But before we start the questions, as promised, I'm going to direct your attention to the chat where you'll see two links, one for a Spanish evaluation, one for an English evaluation. If you could click on that link, 4 simple questions, please answer them honestly, and then we'll be able to use that data and continue bringing quality presentations like this to you. So the first question that we have is around what regional centers are asking folks to sign as the IPP. And there's just some confusion. Services might not be listed. They're just full of outcomes. How come we're signing something and we can't read the whole thing? Can you speak to that? That's a couple of questions in there.
Yeah, definitely saw some of those questions. If you don't feel that you have the information you need to sign, ask for the completed IPP to be sent to you before you sign. I think there was a question in there too about, we had the meeting, we talked about a service, and then we got the IPP and it wasn't included there. First I would follow up with the service coordinator. If you're not getting a response from the service coordinator, I would elevate it to their manager, because the whole intent is that if there was a discussion and there was agreement on the service, that service get captured in the IPP. There could have been a disagreement about a service or a denial of a service, and there's options to address that as well. There could be a follow-up meeting within 15 days, or there could be a request that the individual or family makes for a notice of action. If there's a disagreement and they want to pursue a service appeal. So, Yeah, to start with the original question, if you don't feel comfortable signing and you don't have all the information that you need, request that information prior to signing.
Great,
Oh, and
thank
one
you.
thing, I think sometimes what gets brought up, regional centers are required to leave um, an agreement of services form, because obviously the IPP, to type it up, you may not be able to type it up at the meeting, but there's another part of statute that says, okay, at the end of the IPP, you need to leave a list of agreed upon services. So that may be something that they ask you to sign, and it should clearly delineate what's been agreed to. And, if you feel comfortable, you should sign that. But for the IPP, if you don't have all the information you need, request that.
Okay, always good advice for any times we're dealing with any teams. Um, how about there are a couple of questions about motivation. So how do you include your young adult or your adult in filling out these forms and taking part and being a participatory member in their IPP?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question too. And I think that really speaks to what we tried to accomplish with the Your Plan. Because, when I was an SC last century, we didn't have Your Plan. It was basically, we'd go, we have a planning team meeting and we'd say, okay, we're going to talk about health. We're going to talk about day program. And, now that it's more person-centered, we needed to have some tools and worksheets that would be easy for people to be able to read and say, oh, okay, this is what they want to talk about. Or maybe there's things that, the individual wants to bring up. And, with the different worksheets that are in your plan, it could be a checkbox. It could be narrative. It could be having a parent help you with doing that, or a friend. Tried to keep it in plain language so that they'd be easy for people to read and understand. Marcy, I don't know if there's anything else on that. Okay.
I'm just going to direct folks' attention again to the chat for those two links, the English and the Spanish. I'd like to get at least 75% participation the night of, and we're a bit away from that right now. So you'll find that I get a little annoying about it, but it's really helpful if you could fill those out for us, please. Okay, folks are asking for a sample IPP plan, a form. And if you go to that link that we've been putting in the chat and you'll scroll down, I can't quite get you the PDF of a sample form, but if you go there and you click on it, you'll be able to see the sample form. Correct? Yes. And then the workbooks, do they come in different languages as well?
Yes, we have those in 12 languages.
Okay, because I didn't see that, but I'm obviously going pretty fast, and I didn't know the workbook existed until tonight, so I'm glad for that. I know that my daughter, who's 26 when we had her IPP last year, used my plan, and it was the first time she really participated thoughtfully in her IPP. So that is just that was resounding positivity for us. Okay, so someone's also talking about sample IPP goals. So maybe if you could talk about goals versus outcomes and what we're really after as with this person-centered IPP form.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Goals are the more overriding things, right? And we talked about in the new format, we have the section called Vision for the Future. And that's where it's an opportunity to express what those short and long-term visions or goals are. And then when you get into the life areas, that's when you get more specific, where it's more of an objective, right? So I think the example I brought up about social rec, social rec, if that's a service that is being sought and that is being funded, is social rec in place as a service to meet an objective related to making friends, or is it included as an objective to be able to access the community? So that's and we always get questions about, oh, well, can you share like what a completed IPP looks like? Early on, we did some trainings and we had some sample person, but with person-centered thinking, it needs to be based on that individual, and you can't have like canned objectives. It really has to be a discussion of what's important for that person, and having that goal and objective.
Okay, thanks. So some confusion about having a person-centered plan, and that sounds a lot like this IPP form. Can we just use the person-centered plan for the IPP form? So maybe if you could discuss how the person-centered plan can inform the IPP form and make it go maybe a little easier than if you tried to just do it from scratch.
Yeah, no, it could go either way. The person-centered plan could inform the IPP. The IPP can inform the person-centered plan. You have to have an IPP. The IPP is in statute. It's the driver of services, and captures both funded services and generic resources. So you have to have the IPP. We've received questions in the past about, oh, well, are you trying to get rid of person-centered plans? No. Our goal in developing the standardized IPP was to have an IPP that was person-centered, not to replace a person-centered plan. So if somebody elects to have their person-centered plan, that's great. They still need to have an IPP.
Okay, folks are asking again just for the email address for a follow-up question, and I think that was on the last slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we could get that in the chat, that would be great. People are thanking you already. I'm very happy for providing this information. So as a review, people are saying IPPs are every 3 years with the smaller review in between. When exactly does the form have to start being used by all regional centers? And depending on where you are in the cycle, could you ask to have this new form right away as part of the smaller review?
Yeah, so good question. Every regional center, their cycle may be different. I think probably about half, maybe more than half, do IPPs on an annual basis, and you still have some regional centers that do IPPs every 3 years. If the new IPP rolled out in January of 2025, if you had an IPP done in November of 2024 and your regional center does them every 3 years, then technically you wouldn't have the new IPP, your next IPP until November of 27 in the new format. Can you reach out to your service coordinator and say, hey, instead of waiting until November 2027, I'd like to schedule, and do the IPP in the new format ahead of time. That's definitely something you can request to the regional center.
Okay, and just depending on your regional center and their heavy caseload, it may or may not work, because as we all know, our service coordinators are overworked and underpaid. So we have that problem.
We had that question too. Oh, can we expect the new IPP on January 1st, 2025? Yeah, no, it's a flow process. So thank you for pointing that out.
And I think we talked about the PCP, person-centered plan, and the IPP need to be separated. They are separate documents, but they can inform each other, which is what Ernie was saying. So that one's done. Just a lot of questions about, what if we don't get our services? What if we don't get our IPP on time? I know that doesn't have to do with what we're talking about here tonight, but, it does sort of ancillarily, if that's a word. Would you mind just kind of sharing your wisdom on those questions?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned before, if you're not getting your IPP, start with the service coordinator. If you're not getting a response from the service coordinator, I would recommend going to the manager. We, at the department, we have our Office of Community Operations, where we have staff who are liaisons to each of the regional centers. We get calls sometimes from the community saying, I tried the service coordinator, I tried the manager, it's been 6 months, I haven't heard. And if the individual or family gives us permission, we'll follow up with the regional center and inquire as to, what's going on. We're hearing about this case. Give us a status update, what's going on. So, what we've heard a lot during, obviously, with anything new, is there's going to be a learning curve. People have to adjust doing something in the new format that they may have been doing for many years in a different format. There were some challenges, obviously, in the beginning with the case management systems and having the standardized format available. Those issues have been worked out. And so I think as we enter into the second year of implementation, we should start seeing a lot of those issues ironed out. But if you're still having those challenges and you're not getting a response from the service coordinator, I would advise to elevate it either to the manager, or if you're not getting a response from the regional center in general, feel free to reach out to the department.
Okay, now more of a softball question. What if folks don't have a printer and they want the workbooks or my plan or your plan or everyone's plan? Do they just go and get it printed somewhere, or do you send out, or can they buy hard copies?
I would advise them to ask their service coordinator to send them a printed copy, and just say, hey, I want to have this available as we prepare for our IPP meeting that's coming up. We did discuss with the regional centers early on that there are going to be individuals and families that are going to want a printed copy, and to make those available. So.
Okay. I'm trying to keep our questions really sort of germane to the topic at hand, and we have 3 minutes left. Let's see, because there are questions that are kind of all over the board, which normally happens. There are a couple of questions about parent education and parent support in the new IPP plan, and you answered one, but they keep coming up, so maybe just a little clarity around that, please.
Yeah, and I think my response to that question was, are they talking about like parent support, parent education on the new IPP? So obviously, I would direct people to the videos, direct people to the guides, or are they talking about like a service, a parent education service? Because regional centers will fund like conferences at times. So, if it's a matter of you want more education about the new IPP, I would refer you to the videos and the guides that we have on the website. If it's more of a service question, it'd be a conversation with your local regional center to see if they have a resource available, depending on the topic that the individual or parent is seeking.
Okay, by the clock on the screen, we have 2 minutes left. So I'm just going to ask both Marcy and Ernie if you have any concluding comments, anything you'd like to share with our community.
Marcy, you want to go first?
No closing comments from me. Just thank you so much for having us today. We really appreciate the chance to speak out on the new IPP template.
Yeah, again, thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate people's interest. They should be interested about the IPP. It's the most important document in our system.
Mhm.
I'm going to make the pitch for please do the survey. I know there's survey fatigue. You get a survey when you go to the doctor, you get a survey when you go to Target. This is one that's really informative for us. It's 6 questions, really five. Tell your friends about the IPP survey. We're really trying to get the response rate higher.
Mm.
So if there's one takeaway that you took from me today is please spread the word about the survey. If you haven't been told about the survey, you didn't know a survey existed, please let us know. We'll follow up with that regional center. Like I said, the QR code should be on the IPP agreement and signature page, and it's 5 questions. So thank you for that last pitch.
Okay, and you have to get me to come make them fill it out all the time when they're at their IPP meeting. All right. Well, thank you so much. All the links that were in the chat will be sent out to you in an email along with the slides. We have them in English. We also have the slides in Spanish, so we'll be able to send our Spanish slides out to our Spanish speakers as well. And I want to thank everyone for coming. I certainly want to thank Gabriel for his interpretation. Thank you so much. Thank Nicole, because without her tech support, we probably wouldn't be here tonight. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Marcy and Ernie. Always a pleasure to have you grace our screen. I hope that you'll be able to come back and maybe we'll have more to talk about in the coming semesters. And I